A police officer sworn to protect and serve. A celebrated chef whose burgers had the whole town hooked. And a series of disappearances that no one could explain. But when a devoted wife uncovered the gruesome truth hiding in her own basement, she didn't call for backup, she grabbed a knife. She made sure he never cooked again. And by the time police arrived, the butcher had become the butchered and she was the one in handcuffs. But was she a hero, or just another monster? This case shocked Texas to its core. A thriving restaurant, a series of missing persons, and a horrifying secret hidden in plain sight. By the time authorities put the pieces together, it was too late, the kitchen had already become a slaughterhouse. And when the truth was finally exposed, it didn't end in an arrest. It ended in blood, dismemberment, and a murder that no one saw coming. Now, the person who uncovered the horror is behind bars for life. But did she commit a crime, or was she the only one willing to stop the madness? Welcome to Everyday True Crime, the place where real horror meets reality. If you think you've heard it all, this story will leave you speechless. Before we dive into the shocking details, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because trust me, this case is one you'll never forget. Cassandra Vaughn had spent nearly 2 decades building a reputation as one of Austin's toughest detectives. At 41, she was respected by her peers, feared by criminals, and known for her no-nonsense approach to justice. She didn't just solve cases, she owned them, picking apart every detail until the truth had no place left to hide. But at home, the control she wielded in the streets of Austin slipped through her fingers like sand. Her husband, Devin Vaughn, had once been the love of her life. When they first met, he was charming, ambitious, and full of dreams of opening his own restaurant. Cassandra had supported him through it all, working long shifts while he perfected his recipes and scraped together enough money to open Devin's Southern Grill. And when the doors finally opened, success hit them faster than they ever expected. At first, she was proud. Devin's burgers were unlike anything else in the city, juicy, rich, almost addictive. Food bloggers raved about them, customers lined up around the block, and within a year, he was being featured on TV. But with the fame came changes. Devin started staying out late, making secret phone calls, and dismissing Cassandra's concerns with a smirk and a pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry about the business, babe. You handle crime, I'll handle the grill." It was a joke. But the condescension in his tone made her blood boil. Devin Vaughn never set out to become a monster. At least, that's what he told himself. It started with one mistake. A homeless man had broken into the restaurant late one night, looking for food. Devin caught him in the act, and in a fit of rage, he attacked. One punch too hard. One wrong move. And just like that, the man was dead. Panic set in. Call the cops? No. That would ruin everything. His reputation. His restaurant. His entire life. Then a darker thought crept in. Meat was meat. The idea disgusted him at first. But desperation made people do unimaginable things. With one careful cut, he convinced himself it wasn't as horrifying as it seemed. And when his customers raved about the best burger they'd ever had, Devin didn't stop. One body turned into 2. Then 3. He started choosing his victims more carefully, runaways, drifters, people no one would miss. He'd lure them in with fake job offers or promises of a free meal. And once they stepped into his kitchen, they never left. Cassandra had built a career on her instincts. They had saved her life more times than she could count, helping her track down criminals who thought they could outsmart her. But this time, the warning signs weren't coming from a crime scene, they were coming from inside her own home. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Devin had always been secretive when it came to his restaurant, claiming that every great chef had their own methods. But lately, his behavior had changed in ways she couldn't ignore. He refused to let her inside the restaurant's storage area, snapping at her if she even asked about inventory. His mood swung from charming to irritated in an instant, and whenever she pressed him about the business, he dodged her questions. Then there were the financial records. Cassandra handled their household bills, so she knew Devon's restaurant was making good money, but the numbers weren't adding up. Thousands of dollars in cash withdrawals and deposits sometimes within days of each other, with no listed expenses or extra gigs to match. She asked him about it once over dinner, casually mentioning a discrepancy in their account. Devon barely looked up from his plate. Restaurant expenses. You wouldn't understand. Her grip tightened around her fork. Try me. He sighed, setting his glass down harder than necessary. I have suppliers who don't take credit. It's normal in this business. It didn't sit right with her. Devon might have been arrogant, but he wasn't reckless. He kept detailed records for everything, so why were there thousands of dollars in untraceable transactions? Then came the basement. For 14 years, their home had been an open space, every door free to enter. But suddenly, Devon was locking the basement door, keeping the key on him at all times. When Cassandra asked why, he gave the same smug response, restaurant supplies. You don't need to worry about it. That was the moment the unease in her stomach turned to fear. The night Cassandra followed Devon was supposed to be just another restless evening. She had spent hours tossing and turning, listening to the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway. He hadn't told her where he was going, but she already knew, the restaurant. Something in her gut told her to follow him. She threw on a hoodie, grabbed her keys, and drove after him, keeping her headlights dimmed. It was just past midnight when Devon pulled into the back lot of Devon's Southern Grill. She parked a safe distance away and watched as he got out of his car, popping the trunk. Her breath caught in her throat. He was carrying 2 large black garbage bags. They sagged heavily in his grip, forcing him to adjust his hold. Cassandra stayed hidden, heart pounding as he pushed through the restaurant's back door. She waited, expecting him to return to the dumpster to throw the bags away. But he never came back out. She waited 30 minutes. Nothing. When she finally drove home, her thoughts spiraled. Devon was hiding something, something bad. And she had a sinking feeling she already knew what it was. But it wasn't until she found the bloody clothes that her suspicions turned into something worse. It happened 2 nights later. Devon had just stepped out of the shower when she walked into the laundry room and saw a balled-up shirt stuffed behind the hamper. At first, she thought it belonged to Jordan or Elise. But when she picked it up, her stomach dropped. The fabric was stiff with dried blood. She turned to Devon as he towel-dried his hair. What the hell is this? He barely glanced at the shirt before snatching it from her hands. Meat stains. I was cutting up some beef at the restaurant. Cassandra wasn't stupid. She had seen plenty of real meat stains in her line of work. This wasn't from beef. This was from a person. That night, when Devon finally passed out on the couch, Cassandra made her move. She had seen him enter his phone password enough times to memorize it. With trembling hands, she unlocked his messages. Her pulse pounded as she scrolled through his texts, until she saw something that made her entire body go cold. A message to an unknown number. New meat is ready. Fresh batch tonight. Keep it quiet. Her hands shook. She scrolled up, finding more messages. The same cryptic conversations. Mentions of deliveries and select customers. It was all there. Evidence. She turned to Devon, asleep and oblivious. When he woke up the next morning, she wasted no time. What the hell are you doing, Devon? She threw his phone onto the table. Who the F*** are you texting about, fresh meat? He barely blinked. Then, to her horror, he let out a low, amused laugh. Damn, Cass, he said, stretching. You're really losing it. He grabbed his phone and pocketed it without even looking at the screen. Cassandra's breath came sharp and uneven. I'm not stupid. What are you doing? Devon stepped toward her, lowering his voice. You're overthinking things again. He kissed her forehead, the way he always did when he wanted to shut her up. Then he walked out the door, leaving Cassandra standing there with her blood running cold. Cassandra had spent over a decade solving gruesome crimes. She had walked through crime scenes soaked in blood, looked serial killers in the eye, and seen the darkest corners of humanity. But nothing, could have prepared her for the nightmare hidden right beneath her own feet. The house was quiet. Devon had just left for work. Cassandra stood outside the basement door, her hands trembling as she picked the lock. Devon had never locked it before, not until recently. And after what she had found in his phone, the way he had brushed off her accusations, she knew, something was down there. The door creaked open. A damp, metallic scent flooded her nostrils. Rotting meat. Coppery. Thick. She hesitated at the top of the stairs. A part of her screamed to turn back, to leave it alone. But she forced herself forward, step by step, descending into the unknown. The moment she turned on the light, she held her mouth in disbelief. A butcher shop. A hellish, makeshift slaughterhouse. Hooks lined the ceiling, some still dripping with blood. A stainless steel table sat in the center, deep knife marks carved into its surface. Freezers hummed in the corner, each labeled with dates, no names, just dates. Then she saw them. Scattered across the floor, tucked behind crates of supplies, bones. Human bones. Skulls, femurs, ribs. Some still had flesh attached. Her stomach clenched. She covered her mouth, fighting the urge to scream, to vomit, to run. But the worst part? Some of the remains were fresh. Her mind raced. Missing people. Unsolved cases. Devon's strange behavior. The restaurant's special meat blend. It all clicked. He had been feeding people, to people. Cassandra stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of butcher knives. Her chest felt tight. It was as if the walls were closing in on her. The thought hit her like a freight train. Had she eaten it? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to recall every meal, every burger she had tasted from Devon's restaurant. The rich flavors. The secret ingredient he had always refused to share. Her stomach lurched. Oh my God. She had eaten it. Her hands curled into fists. Anger overtook her fear, a deep, burning rage. Devon had not only murdered innocent people, he had made her an unwilling accomplice. She barely remembered how she got upstairs. The next thing she knew, she was pacing the living room, waiting. Every second that passed fueled her rage. Every memory of their marriage felt like a lie. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with their children, had been butchering human beings in their own home. Then she heard the front door unlock. Devon stepped inside, tossing his keys on the counter. He barely had time to register the look in her eyes before she lunged. How long? She screamed, shoving him against the wall. How long have you been doing this? He didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked, that same cocky, arrogant smile he always wore when he knew he had the upper hand. Long enough, he said. And you never even noticed. Her fists clenched. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't afraid. He was mocking her. Devon stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've been eating my burgers for years, he whispered. You didn't complain then. Cassandra had never felt rage like this before. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed the butcher knife from the kitchen counter. Devon saw the look in her eyes, but he didn't step back. He just smirked. What now, detective? He taunted. Gonna arrest me? Or do you finally get it? We're not so different after all. The words were gasoline on a fire. Cassandra lost control. She lunged forward, plunging the knife into his stomach. The first stab was instinct. The second was justice. By the third, she wasn't thinking anymore. 4. 5. 6. Devin gasped, his smirk vanishing as he stumbled back, blood pooling through his shirt. But Cassandra didn't stop. 7. 8. 9. His body slumped to the floor, eyes wide with shock. 10. 11. 12. A strangled gurgle escaped his lips, but Cassandra didn't hear it. 13. 14. Then silence. She was panting, gripping the knife so tightly her knuckles turned white. Devin's body twitched once before going completely still. The reality of what she had just done came crashing down. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the walls, on her hands. What had she done? She had spent her life putting killers away. And now she was one of them. But there was no time to break down. No time to cry. She had to fix this. The first thing she did was drag his body to the basement. The same basement where he had butchered so many others. The irony made her stomach turn. She grabbed a hacksaw and went to work, forcing herself not to think, not to feel. Bone cracked. Flesh tore. Blood coated her arms. By the time she was done, Devin was nothing more than pieces. She stuffed his remains into garbage bags, tying them shut with trembling fingers. She needed to get rid of them. Her plan was simple. Drive out to a remote area, somewhere with deep woods, maybe a river. Somewhere no one would ever find him. But there was a problem. Devin's restaurant staff had started calling. He had to sort out his special delivery. None of his staffs were allowed to handle delivery, that's why they kept calling. First, just a few missed calls. Then texts. Then concerned voicemails. Hey, boss, everything okay? You never miss a delivery. Should we be worried? Cassandra, have you seen Devin? This isn't like him. Panic crept into her chest. If she didn't act fast, people would start asking questions. So she did the only thing she could think of, she reported him missing. She walked into the police station, her own workplace, and filed a missing persons report. She told them Devin had gone out for a late-night drive and never returned. She faked concern. She faked tears. She lied to her colleagues' faces. And for a while, it worked. For 3 days, the lie held up. But then, the footage surfaced. Surveillance cameras near Cassandra's house caught her loading heavy garbage bags into her car in the middle of the night. That alone wouldn't have been enough to arrest her. But then forensics teams were sent to their home. They combed through every room, until they reached the basement. What they found sealed Cassandra's fate. Blood. Everywhere. The walls. The floor. The ceiling. Even after she had scrubbed it, the forensic team used luminol, revealing everything. The missing persons case turned into a murder investigation. And Cassandra Vaughn was the prime suspect. Cassandra barely had 48 hours of freedom before the walls closed in. The moment investigators found Devin's remains in a landfill, the case against her was sealed. SWAT officers stormed her home at dawn. She didn't fight back. She didn't run. She just stood there, covered in Devin's blood, waiting for them. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The same cuffs she had used on criminals for years. Detective Cassandra Vaughn, you're under arrest for the murder of Devin Vaughn. At the station, she didn't last long in interrogation. At first, she tried to stay silent, but the weight of everything, the horror, the blood, the betrayal, crushed her. She broke down. Through sobs and shaking hands, she told them everything. How she had discovered Devon's horrifying secret. How she had confronted him. And how, in a blind rage, she had killed the man she once loved. But it was Devon's cannibal operation that shook the town to its core. The man they had trusted to serve them food, had been feeding them human flesh. The news spread like wildfire. Customers were horrified. Families of missing victims were devastated. People weren't just mourning the dead, they were sickened, realizing they had eaten them. Cassandra never denied the murder. But that didn't mean the justice system would be kind to her. The prosecution argued that she had been a cop, she knew the law, she had options. Instead of reporting Devon, instead of turning in the evidence, she had taken justice into her own hands. The trial was swift and brutal. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Verdict, guilty. She was sentenced to 100 years in prison, no chance of parole. Her badge, her career, her freedom, gone. The moment the trial ended, Devon's restaurant was shut down for good. The health department bulldozed the building within a week. But nothing could erase the trauma. Families of the victims were outraged, knowing their loved ones had been butchered and served as food. And Cassandra? She became infamous. The cop who killed the cannibal chef. Some saw her as a hero. Others saw her as just another murderer. Either way, her fate was sealed. This case remains one of the most shocking murders in Texas history. A respected cop. A beloved chef. A secret that turned an entire town's stomach. Cassandra Vaughn thought she was bringing a monster to justice. Instead, she became one herself. Was she justified? Or did she let her rage consume her, turning a crime into another crime? The case of Cassandra and Devon Vaughn reminds us that sometimes, the biggest horrors aren't lurking in the shadows, they're sitting across the dinner table. If you found this case as disturbing as we did, make sure to like and subscribe to Everyday True Crime. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next case.